Go ahead, Francis.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 39th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress as shown here. Both this and the Secret Teaching series are also now available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald Secret Doctrine or Secret Teachings. As is our habit, we'll start by checking in on HPB's travels as described in old diary leaves. Last month, we read about Colonel Olcott ridding a local young monk of the unwanted advances of a Yakshini demon lover. That's something you don't read about every day. In this week's, just before this month's reading, Olcott has returned from his tour in Ceylon, and he and HPB have moved into their new headquarters in Adiyar. As the diary continues, we find them bathing in the river that runs adjacent to the headquarters there and their residence. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Lynn, can you start us off, please?
Yes. Headquarters viewed across the Adiyar River, as our lives are made up of unconsidered trifles, and as I wish to give my narrative the seal of reality, I have mentioned many little incidents which help to fill in the picture and place us, pioneers, before the mind's eye as living beings, not as the absurd exaggerations which have been so often, so unfortunately indulged in. If HPB wrote mighty books, she also ate her fried eggs swimming in grease every morning. And this narrative has to do with the actual personage instead of the ideal. So I record a little detail that interested me enough at the time to make me record it. The presence of a little river back of the house awakened in us the old love of a swimming, and we all went in for it. HPB with the rest of us. It must have astonished our European neighbors to see us 4 Europeans, for that was the time of the 2 columns, bathing along with a half dozen dark-skinned Hindus and splashing about and laughing together, exactly as though we did not believe we belonged to a superior race.
And the next, another reader, please.
Joe?
I taught my chum, HPB, to swim, or rather to flounder about after a fashion, and also dear Damodar, who was up to a certain point one of the greatest cowards I ever saw in the water. He would shiver and tremble if the water was half knee high, and you may believe that either HPB nor I spared him our sarcasms. I remember well how all that changed. Fie, said I, a pretty adept you will make when you dare not even wet your knee. He said nothing then, but the next day, when we went bathing, he plunged in and swam across the stream, having taken my taunt as meant, and decided that he should swim or die. That's the way for people to grow into adepts. Try is the first, last, and eternal law of self-evolution. Fail 50, 500 times if you must, but try on and try ever, and you will succeed at the end. I cannot, never built a man or a planet.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, so you can see some of the main players in the HPV society. I mean, in the it's the Theosophical Society. On the left up there, you have a different look for Colonel Olcott, and then Suba Ro, who wrote Esoteric Buddhism, and then the subject of this diary entry, Damodar K. Mavalankar, and then HPB. Up here, you see them all grouped together. Just so interesting to me, this aspect of it. However, it's time to move on, and we finished our last session in the middle of HPB's extended commentary on verse 2 of stanza 5. This is one of the longest commentaries, if not the longest so far. Verse 2 reads, they make of him the messenger of their will. The Dzayu becomes Fohat, the swift son of the divine sons, whose sons are the Lupika, runs circular errands. Fohat is the steed, and the thought is the rider. He passes like lightning through the fiery clouds, takes 3 and 5 and 7 strides through the 7 regions above and the 7 below. He lifts his voice and calls the innumerable sparks and joins them. Today we'll start just as HPB begins to intensify her focus on Fohat. So could we get a reader for not the verse, but just where it starts with the C and begins with Fohat.
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Right.
There you go.
Fohat, being one of the most, if not the most important character in esoteric cosmogony, should be minutely described. As in the oldest Grecian cosmogony, differing widely from the later mythology, Eros is the third person in the primeval trinity, Chaos, Gaia, Eros. Answering to the Kabbalistic Ein Sof, for chaos is space, kaino, void, the boundless all, Shekinah and the Ancient of Days, or the Holy Ghost. So Fohat is one thing in the yet unmanifested universe, and another in the phenomenal and cosmic world. In the latter, he is that occult, electric, vital power which, under the will of the creative Logos, unites and brings together all forms, giving them the first impulse which becomes in time law. But in the unmanifested universe, Fohat is no more than this, than Eros is the later brilliant winged Cupid, or love. Fohat has naught to do with cosmos yet, since cosmos is not born, and the gods still sleep in the bosom of Father Mother.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Any thoughts or questions about this preliminary segment? To get a better understanding of the primordial Greek and Kabbalistic trinities listed here, let's do a little mini comparative tutorial of the concepts and the entities in each. Could we start with the reader for this segment on chaos?
Okay, let's ask our intrepid Anne Veronica, who may even be able to pronounce some of the Greek terms.
Good idea.
Can you unmute yourself, Anne Veronica?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm on the telephone, but I'll do the best I can. Cow, house, Greek from
Kaino.
the hino to grape, yawn, open. The earth was without form and void, says Genesis in describing the first stages of cosmogony. In Greek mythology contains the same idea of the primordial emptiness and formlessness which precedes the rebirth of a universe after Pralaya. It was the vacant and spiritual space which exists before the creation of the universe or the world. From it proceeded darkness and night. House is chaotic only in the sense that it constitutes an unformed and unrecognized. It is the cosmic storehouse of all the latent or resting seeds from former Manvantaras. It means space, not the boundless Parabrahman Mula Capriti, but the space of any particular hierarchy descending into manifestation. In one sense, it is the condition of a solar system or planetary chain during its pralaya, containing all the elements in an undifferentiated state. A ether and house are two principles immediately posterior to the first principle. Various terms more or less synonymous are Akasa, the universal egg, from which Brahma issued a light, issued as light, the virgin egg, the virgin mother, the immaculate root, fructified by the ray, the primeval deep, the abyss, the great mother. The divine ray and house are father and mother or cosmic fire and water. House, theos, cosmos, or the triple deity or all in all. House was personified in Egypt by the goddess Neith, who is the father, mother of the stanzas of Dzyan, the Akasa of the Hindus, the Svavahat of the Northern Buddhists, and the Icelandic Jinnu
It's actually Hinungagap.
Hinungangap. I'm sorry, I didn't do my best.
Oh no, you're just fine. It's interesting, and so the Greek pronunciation of the Greek word chaos is house, huh?
House, yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, it's quite different. Of course, house is the more correct pronunciation. So, any questions about this? Notable here is that we're not talking about the absolute all in capitals, right? We're talking about that pralaic state that or coming out of that pralaic state, I should say, before manifestation begins in any particular solar system, or you could say galaxy or region. It is not, or even of the universe as a whole, but not the absolute, which is beyond manifestation. So it's a little bit different than that. And, you know, those of you who are doing the Secret Teachings of All Ages webinars, you'll recognize that Hinunga gap, which is a concept that was talked about. Okay, next up, let's see here. This is the Kabbalistic version of chaos or chaos. So if we could get a reader, please. That's pronounced Ein Sof.
I can read. This is Regine. En Sof, nothing, the negatively existent one, or the nothing of space, corresponding closely in some respects to the mystical sunyata of Mahayana Buddhism, used in the
Mahayana
Buddhism, used in the Kabbalah for that which is above, Kether, or
macroprosopis, which just means the cosmic face or the big face.
I.e. nothing. It is so named because we do not know, and it is impossible to know that which there is in the principle, because it never descends as far as our ignorance, and because it is above wisdom itself. Strictly speaking, Ian signifies abstract, beingness, or the vast spatial deep in which all existence takes their rise. Anything that is existence is a production and exist. In the womb of being, or beingness, from which existence arise, is not only the cause of all existence, but likewise their field of action, the spatial deeps, often wrongly translated as nothing, but beingness is certainly not nothing, but essential full beingness itself. Can you explain that a little?
You know, you could study your whole life on this one topic. And in fact, Michael Robbins does a whole series, webinar series on this concept of beingness. And you would be no closer to understanding what it is, because it is the most transcendent source of spirit that we have. You could say that it is, you can only begin to understand it by contrasts. And probably the fundamental contrast is the difference between beingness and being. So beingness is life itself. It's the life principle, unembodied. So it isn't, the limitation of the idea of God is that it conjures the idea of a singularity, of an individual, as it were, like in the Sistine Chapel, you have this bearded guy reaching out to Adam, as a younger man. And this is all very, very limited compared to the Eastern understanding of this concept, which is that which pre-exists any manifestation whatsoever. It's in theosophy, it's called the first logos. And it's, you could say, the repository of all potential becoming, all potential becoming, but includes within it no becoming itself. However, as is mentioned here, it's also the environment in which becoming, or those singularities that follow, have their existence, and to which they will return. Okay, so I hope that helps a little bit. If you're totally fascinated by this topic, sign up for Michael's, what is it called, BL?
It's Identify as Being.
Yeah, Identify as
And
Being.
he's just starting a brand new series, Series 5, in I'll look the link up, but and Veronica suggested that he would really love this phrase, so I'm going to take a screenshot and send it to him.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, so you have, two ideas. Here's the Greek concept of chaos. And, it's completely, or house, I'll try to use the right. I don't know that I can do that. But which is, normally used to mean disorder, and it's almost like an emotionally charged condition, but that's not at all the meaning, of course, here. It's, as he said, it's only chaotic in the sense that its constituents are unformed and unorganized. That is to say, not organized in the form aspect that could then identify them as singularities, right? And of course, if you're going to do a picture or an illustration of chaos, I loved it. I looked up Hinungagap, and one of the illustrations was just a black field, just black, right? And that's much more accurate than what you're seeing here. But it helps to conjure this idea. Anyway, and then here's the Kabbalistic understanding, which is Ein Sof. I have no idea what this illustration is doing, and we're not going to try to figure it out either. 7, 8, 9, 10. See, I immediately start counting things. But the fact that there's any delineation of what could be called concepts actually takes it beyond the whole field of what it's trying to represent, which is, in this case, Ein Sof, or Ein Sof. So anyway, let's move on. Next up, Gaia, or Gaia, or Ge. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, please, Yvonne, if you'll read that for us.
Gaia, or Gaia, one of the older gods, described as the first being that sprang from chaos and was as giving birth to Uranus, heaven, and Pontos, the sea. Yet it was by Uranus that Gaia gave birth to the Titans, Cyclopes, and Hecatoncheires. This apparent anomaly is due partly to the variable meaning of the word earth, which may mean either primordial matter in process of formation or the earth as already formed. Gaia is thus, in one sense, equivalent to Aditi, or the great cosmic deep. With Kaios and Eros, Gaia forms the primeval trinity. Gaia is represented by its initial gamma, which is also the third letter in the Greek alphabet, and thus indicates the third stage of cosmic evolution. As the primordial mother, she was worshipped as the nourisher of all things, also as the goddess of death, to whom all must return.
Okay, thank you. So the Shekinah is the Kabbalistic version of Gaia. So can we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Martha, can you read that for us, please? Martha G. Can you unmute yet? Oops, I'm sorry. I'm still getting used to the way everything works here.
I am too, Bia. All right. Shekinah. In the Kabbalah, used in a cosmic sense, termed the superior Shekinah as the first splendor or divine or spiritual substance emanating from Ein Sof and enveloping it as a veil, from which proceeded the hierarchy of the Sephiroth. This thought corresponds to the Hindu Parabrahman and its splendorous veil, Mola Prakriti, from which proceed the hierarchies of the manifested universe. The inferior Shekinah is associated with the 10th or lowest Sephirah, Malkuth, kingdom or dwelling, which is equivalent to the material or physical universe, as the vehicle or carrier of all the preceding hierarchies of Sephiroth.
Thank you, Martha. So just like with Gaia, it can be interpreted at two levels, right? So, it says here, the apparent anomaly is due in partly the variable meaning of the word earth, which may mean either primordial matter, that's the Aditi of the Shekinah, in process of formation, that's that shining homogeneity, it's sometimes called, or the earth has already formed. So we have that same idea in this thought, suggesting obviously a common esoteric root. Okay, next up is the third aspect of the Trinity, which in the Greek is eros. Can we get a reader, please?
Yes, Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. Eros, Greek, love, desire, represented in the Hesiodic theogony as one of four self-existent deities, the others being Chaos, Gaia, and Erebos, otherwise as the son of Aphrodite by either Ares, Zeus, or Hermes. Eros is the cosmic force which causes the unmanifest to seek self-manifestation. It is divine love, will, desire, the desire to manifest in creative activity and thus to give life and existence to all beings. This desire, which arises first in it from the Secret Doctrine, is in the gods and in all nature. After the worlds have been manifested, Eros then becomes under the form of Fohat, the ever-active force which brings together and combines the elemental atoms. Fohat, in his capacity of divine love, Eros, the electric power of affinity and sympathy, is shown allegorically as trying to bring the pure spirit, the ray inseparable from the one absolute, into union with the soul. Eros, like his synonyms, amor, and Cupido, acts on many planes.
Thanks, Karen. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, the Kabbalistic version is the Holy, and Christian is the Holy Ghost. So could we get this is a 14th century depiction of the abstraction of the Holy Ghost breaking forth. Could we get a reader, please?
Oops, Scott, can you read that for us, please?
The Holy Ghost is the spiritual ray from the central sun, which passes down through the planes of manifestation, penetrating all hierarchies in its course, and therefore likewise the human mind, when it is permitted ingress into his soul. It is equivalent to the light of the Logos, David Prakriti, the Gnostic Sophia, the Kabbalistic Shekinah, or perhaps Sephirah, the mother of the Ogdoad, and in Indian thought, the feminine Sakti. But while David Prakriti is the light of the Logos, this is only because the Logos transmits to itself the light from above.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, so just notice the relationship to the Eros concept, or Eros. They are both representative of phohatic energy, the bridging energy of spirit to matter. Okay, so
Francis?
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
Anne Veronica says, I have a feeling the Eros is the lower Mercury, connect humanity with the gods, but in a lower spiral.
Well, yeah, Fohat works, it's talked about 7 brothers of Fohat, right? So it works on every level, from the highest cosmic, that initiating energy that actually enables chaos to demonstrate itself, right, in those first and highest manifestations, all the way down to literally electricity. Right. So that mercurial aspect, the messenger of the gods, is the giveaway, by the way. The fact that it's a messenger is just part of the chain. Right. But, all that, not just Mercury, but all the planets are animated by phohatic energy. It's the way astrology works. We're actually experiencing the impress of the phohatic energy of the celestial regions, you could say. Thanks for your thought. Okay. Any further ideas or thoughts or questions on the Kabbalistic or Greek trinities? It's kind of a fascinating study, isn't it? There's so much connective tissue. And of course, if you did a deep dive, we could spend the rest of the webinar looking at other cultures, because they all have these concepts intact, right? Certainly the Hindus, and Mesopotamian, it's Peruvian, the Northern Germanic, they all have these concepts, right? So and like I said, those of you who have been with me with the Secret Teachings webinars, you may recognize these concepts, if not, specific personages. Okay, Eros was also known as protogonus, which means firstborn, because he embodied the force by which manifestation could occur. Thus, though popularly associated with, for instance, stimulating sexual desire or the love connection, Eros is identical with Fohat. Next, HPB describes the 2 phases of Fohat, and in so doing gives us a succinct definition of the active side of this primal living bridging energy. Quote, Fohat is that occult electric vital power which, under the will of the creative logos, unites and brings together all forms, giving them the first impulse which becomes in time law. And the law she's talking about, of course, is the law demonstrates all through the law of nature. It's the law of manifestation, right? So it's important to realize that it's you could say a demonstration of the will aspect of the creative logos, which is, for Theosophists, that's the third logos, right? That impulse, we learned earlier in the Secret Doctrine, is, quote, the dynamic energy of cosmic ideation, or regarded from the other side, it is the intelligent medium, the guiding power of all manifestation, the thought divine, as well as the animating principle electrifying every atom into life. So it's a far-reaching principle. To learn about Fohat's primordial inactive aspect, we'll need to finish the paragraph. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, I'm going to call on Roz, but first I want to let you know that she said, so all these images are a personification of the energy of manifestation.
Well, the last two, let's go back here. This image and this image, this is more abstract, right? They're the same. And then these are all personifications, yes, of this bridging into energy of that animates all existence. However, at the same time, it is taught that Fohat itself is an entity. It's one of those, extraordinary mysteries. How it's both entified and abstracted as the bridging energy between spirit and matter. In that way, it's like the soul, but it can be found in all aspects of manifestation, and it exists before manifestation, as is described in this coming paragraph here. Let me get back here. So, yeah, this is where we are, right? So,
Okay. Can you read that for us, please, Roz? I think you're self-muted.
Give her a moment. It takes time to figure out this is Zoom. There's a microphone with a line through it. You just click on it and the line will disappear and then you can speak. Okay, you're going to need to come back to somebody.
Okay. All right. Lenore, can you read that for us, please?
They make of him the mess. Can you hear me?
Oh, wait. Okay. Right in the middle of the page, it says he is an abstract philosophical idea. That's where we'll start.
Thank you. He is an abstract philosophical idea. He produces nothing yet by himself. He is simply that potential creative power in virtue of whose action the nominal of all future phenomenal divides, so to speak, but to reunite in a mystic supersensual act, the emit, the creative ray. When the divine sun breaks forth, then Fohat becomes the propelling force, the active power, which causes the one to become two and three, and the cosmic plane of manifestation. The triple one differentiates into the many, and then Fohat is transformed into that force which brings together the elemental atoms and makes them aggregate and combine. We find an echo of this primal teaching in early Greek mythology. Erebos and Nux are born out of chaos, and under the action of Eros, give birth in their turn to Aether and Hemera, the light of the superior and the light of the inferior of terrestrial regions. Darkness generates light. See the Puranas, Brahma's will or desire to create, and in the Phasean cosmology of the doctrine. The doctrine that desire is the principle of creation.
Okay, thank you. So, this is, every discipline has some form of teaching that brings out this concept of Fohat, which is a reflection of the Brahmic will. Brahma is used here being the creative logos, right? Okay, any thoughts or questions about this part? So Fohat passes through 3 stages. First, it represents the potential creative power through which, quote, the noumenon of all future phenomena divides. Then, when the divine sun breaks forth, Fohat becomes the propelling force, the active power, which causes the 1 to become 2 and 3. Then finally, Fohat is, quote, transformed into that force which brings together the elemental atoms and makes them aggregate and combine. So first, potential, then divisive or dividing or involutionally propelling, and finally, cohesive. Any thoughts about this?
Karen's got her hand up. Go ahead, Karen. You should be able to self-unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, down here, I'm just wondering, what is the relationship, if any, between Fohat and prana?
Fohat and karma.
No, and prana.
Oh, prana. You could say prana is itself Fohatic, because it's a means by which vitality is extended into the physical form.
Right.
So any transference of energy, but prana would be a limited concept in that it is specific in its purpose, whereas Fohatic is whereas you could say prana is Fohatic, but Fohat demonstrates as prana, but also in a number of other ways.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah, and just the idea of it being a bridging energy that animates form.
Yeah,
right?
vitalizes. It's the life behind. It's the noumenon, the life behind the form.
Well, it's not the source of life, like we use the concept of life in all capitals, but it's that which you could say brings life to form. Yeah. So it's an animating energy, and in that way, it certainly is life-giving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Karen?
No, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, let's read about Erebos Nux. Okay, here we are. Yeah. Erebos, Nux, Ether, and Hemera. Can we get a reader for this segment?
I'll read it. I apologize beforehand,
In
and
advance.
Veronica. Yes. Erebus, Greek, darkness. Erebus and Nux or Nyx, night, sprang from chaos. And the pair gave birth in their turn to Aether and Hemera, day. Darkness begets light. Erebus was the spiritual or active side corresponding to Brahman in Hindu philosophy, and Nyx, the passive side corresponding to Pradhana or Mula Prakriti. Then from Erebos and Nyx as dual were born Aether and Humera, spirit and day. Spirit being here again in this succeeding stage, the active side, the day and the passive aspect, the substantial or vehicular side. Cosmically, the darkness spoke of here is the light of cosmic spirit, which is so far beyond all human ability to grasp or sense that to us, even intellectually, it is as darkness. Because even our intellectual light, being a secondary derivative from the cosmic darkness, is like a shadow to it. Therefore, darkness and night, signifying the light of cosmic spirit in connection with original substance, here called night, gave birth to cosmic aether and day. Similarly, the name Erebus became transferred to the underworld because its vast regions, reaching as they do into the cosmic deeps, are to human intelligence obscure and therefore dark.
Yeah, so Erebus is actually the Greek version of absolute light because it's the source of the light of day, right? Which is another concept, Humera, this of ether and Humera. It's the Humera being the spirit of, being the daylight, which comes from the Erebus absolute light. Okay, so it's manifest light compared to absolute light, right? So you have this fabulous Greek depiction of this. It looks like about to activate this extraordinary sphere that is enwrapped with a serpent, right? Okay. Any thoughts or questions about these concepts? Next, we have Sanchoniathon. He was a Phoenician writer who lived before the Trojan War. Fragments of his work were translated by Philobiblius, 1st and 2nd century, whose writings are known to us only through the works of Eusebius. Note the current relevance of this quote. Could we get a reader for this short quote? You could read it, BL.
Oh, I was just going to ask Tia if she could read it
Yeah,
for
go
us,
ahead,
please.
fine, whatever.
Tia, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. From early youth, we are accustomed to hearing falsified reports, and our minds have been saturated with prejudice for centuries, to the extent that we guard the fantastic lies like a treasure, so that in the end, the truth becomes unbelievable and the lie appears to be truth. Sanchuniathon.
Sanchuniathon.
Yeah.
Ring a bell, anybody? Does it seem vaguely relevant? Yeah, it's amazing how so often these ancient writers are describing modern conditions. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please, including the footnote when it appears, which is actually at the end of the reading. So,
Martha S., can you read that for us, please?
Yes. So starting where, sorry?
with Fohat, it's closely related.
Okay. Fohat is closely related to the one life. From the unknown one, the infinite totality, the manifested one, or the periodical Manvantaric deity, emanates. And this is the universal mind, which, separated from its fountain source, is the demi-ergos, or the creative logos of the Western Kabbalists, and the four-faced Brahma of the Hindu religion. In its totality, viewed from the standpoint of manifested divine thought in the esoteric doctrine, it represents the hosts of the higher creative Dhyan Chohans. Dhyan Chohans.
There you go.
Simultaneously with the evolution of the universal mind, the concealed wisdom of Adi Buddha, the one supreme and eternal, manifests itself as
Avalokiteshvara.
I knew you could do that for me, thank you. Which is the Osiris of the Egyptians, the Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the heavenly man of the Hermetic philosopher, the Logos of the Platonists, and the Atman of the Vedantins.
And the footnote?
Mr. Suba Rowe seems to identify him with and to call him the Logos.
Okay, yeah, that's good enough. Thanks, Martha. Any thoughts or questions about this? So just look at, let's see, well, let me get, after telling us that Fohad is related to the one life, HPB details the manifestation from the first to the third logi and the names given them by various spiritual disciplines. Let's take a closer look. The first half of the paragraph lists the sequence shown below in the blue square, which unfolds in three phases. The unknown one, the infinite totality, which then through Fohad becomes the manifested one, the periodical manvantaric deity, the universal mind, demiurgos, these are all synonyms, right? The creative logos, the four-faced Brahma of the Hindu religion. And from that comes the hosts of the higher creative Dhyan Chohans, right? In the second half of the paragraph, HPB describes a simultaneous evolution, simultaneous to the other, that emanates from Adi Buddha. So you have here the concealed wisdom of Adi Buddha. Notice the abstract quality going on here. The one supreme and eternal, which becomes the manifested Ishvara, which is Avalokiteshvara, but it's really Ishvara. In Ishvara is a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, which is the Osiris of the Egyptians, the Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the heavenly man of the Hermetic philosopher, the Logos of the Platonist, and the Atman of the Vedantins. So this allows us, if we wanted to go down any one of these rabbit holes, to find out more about this stage of consciousness, right? We could read all about Osiris and know thereby more about Avalokiteshvara. The same thing with Ahura Mazda, etc. Right?
Francis?
Yeah.
Ross asks, is Avalokiteshvara, an incarnation of the Dalai Lama?
Well, certainly not. It could be the other way around, yeah, I've heard this idea. Avalokiteshvara is the god of this solar system. So in one sense, everything is a manifestation or an incarnation of some aspect of that highest being. I mean, we're talking about, Oya-Ohu the younger, the effulgent glory, the 7 in 1, right, at this level. I mean, when you look up an illustration, I wish I had one, of Avalokiteshvara, it's this astonishing being with all these heads and 1,000 arms going in all directions, right? So it's the Godhead in its first singularity. So, it's too high a being for the Dalai Lama, no matter at what level of reverence you hold any single human being. It would be too high a being to say that it's a direct incarnation of that. I mean, the planetary logos is less exalted than this being, who would be more like, in our solar system, the solar logos, right? So I don't know what to tell you beyond that. I mean, I know I've heard this from other sources too, but that's my take on it. And and that doesn't take anything away from this extraordinary being who is the Dalai Lama. And he's the 14th incarnation, I believe, isn't that right? 14 of this extraordinary being who has incarnated numerous times in order to ground the teachings that manifest in past times through Tibet. My understanding is he has said that this will be his last incarnation, and it's that makes sense since Tibet is now not holding that sacred tradition any longer. But I'm no Hindu. I'm no Tibetan Buddhist scholar, or I don't know all that much. I've read a couple of biographies is all. Anything else? Anyone else about this?
Robert, did you have a question? You should have a mic now.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you very much. It was about the format, new format.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. So let's move on to the second half of the paragraph. Could we get a reader for this, please? Could we get a reader for this, please?
I'm sorry. I was reading a comment to you and didn't realize I was on mute. Okay. Roz says, I just Googled it and it says Dalai Lama is also considered to be the successor in a line of Tulkas who are believed to be incarnations of Avalokiteshvara.
Avalokiteshvara.
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
well, yeah, I'm not going to say any more about that. As I said, you're going to have possibly a local Tibetan understanding of a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara that is, in a sense, a lesser god than the original solar logoic 7-in-1 singularity, right? Which is what HPB is equating Avalokiteshvara to, right? So like I said, basically saying that is like saying that he's a manifestation of the solar logos, not even the planetary logos, which is, well, that's what it's saying. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, Robert, can you read this for us, please?
Starting with by the action in the middle of the page.
Okay. By the action of the manifested wisdom, or Mahat, represented by these innumerable centers of spiritual energy in the cosmos, the reflection of the universal mind, which is cosmic ideation, and the intellectual force accompanying such ideation, becomes objectively the Fohat of the Buddhist esoteric philosopher. Fohat, running along the 7 principles of Akasha, acts upon manifested substance or the one element, as declared above, and by differentiating it into various centers of energy, sets in motion the law of cosmic evolution, which in obedience to the ideation of the universal mind, brings into existence all the various states of being in the manifested solar system. The solar system brought into existence by these agencies consists of 7 principles, like everything else within these centers. Such as the teaching of the trans-Himalayan esotericism. Every philosophy, however, has its own way of dividing these principles.
Thank you, Robert. So any thoughts or questions? She really packs it in, doesn't she? In this segment, we're given another series of analogous terms describing a further stage of manifestation from the two groups already given. So we have, by the action of manifested women, where'd that come from? By the action of manifested wisdom, which is mahat, the reflection of the universal mind, cosmic ideation, and the intellectual force accompanying such ideation comes into being. And that becomes the objective fohat. So there's a third line of descent represented here, right? Which is the mahatic, or the universal mind manifesting as mahat, or manifested wisdom, which reflects itself as cosmic ideation, which is an intellectual force, right? And that becomes the objective fohat. So we have three lines described here. It can be very bewildering. You have to go back through and really unravel some of what she says, right? Okay. Following this, HPB gives us an esoteric description / definition of fohat akasha. Akasha is here used, refers to both the reservoir of being and of beings, and more to the point discussed here, the upadi, or vehicle of divine thought. So fohat both differentiates homogeneous substance and, quote, sets in motion the law of cosmic evolution in obedience to the ideation of the universal mind. That's why that whole third line was brought in. So in obedience to the ideation of the universal mind, which in turn, quote, brings into existence all the various states of being in the manifested solar system. So quite complex, but you eventually start seeing the thread that weaves through all these various forms of manifestation. This exactly describes the Greek eros, the, quote, cosmic force which causes the unmanifest to seek self-manifestation, the desire to manifest in creative activity, and thus to give life and existence to all beings. The fact that eros / fohat is the active expression of universal mind is indicated by, in this illustration, by the serpent, which always stands for transcendental wisdom or cosmic ideation, right? That's the mahatic, the mahat idea. Okay, next, we learn that the final fohatic work of differentiation ultimately results in the 7 principles, which demonstrates both micro and macro cosmically. Here's a chart from the Theosophical Glossary, which we're not going to get into because here HPB only mentions it in passing, but also because it's just one of the many ways to describe these 7 principles that fohat delineates, as you can see from these additional charts, also from the Theosophical Glossary. And we'll be revisiting a lot of the ideas shown in these 2 charts as we get into these ideas specifically, right? Karen brought up the idea of prana, right? And the life essence and vitality. So it is one of the delineated energetics that is made so, delineated by fohat, okay? All right. Thoughts or questions on any of this? The 7 principles and how fohat brings them forth. Okay, then, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Fohat then is the personified electric vital power, the transcendental binding unity of all cosmic energies, on the unseen as on the manifested planes, the action of which resembles on an immense scale that of a living force created by will in those phenomena where the seemingly subjective acts on the seemingly objective and propels it to action. Fohat is not only the living symbol and the container of that force, but is looked upon by the occultists as an entity, the forces he acts upon being cosmic, human, and terrestrial, and exercising their influence on all those planes respectively. On the earthly plane, his influence is felt in the magnetic and active force generated by the strong desire of the magnetizer. On the cosmic, it is present in the constructive power that carries out in the formation of things, from the planetary system down to the glowworm and simple daisy. The plan in the mind of nature or in the divine thought with regard to the development and growth of that special thing. He is metaphysically the objectivized thought of the gods, the word made flesh on a lower scale, and the messenger of cosmic and human ideations, the active force in universal life. In a secondary aspect, Fohat is the solar energy, the electric vital fluid, and the preserving fourth principle, the animal soul of nature, so to say, or electricity.
Thank you, Joe. So this is my go-to paragraph for understanding Fohat, but it's, with so many descriptions, it can be a bit bewildering. So I've regrouped the descriptions just in this paragraph, and hopefully this will make things a bit clearer. In terms of essence, Fohat is the transcendental binding unity of all cosmic energies. It says at the highest levels. It's a living force created and at the behest of the will of the creative logos. And it is the living symbol and container of that force. In activity, it's the active force in universal life. It propels the seemingly objective to action. The constructive power that through the formation of things carries out the plan, and is the messenger of cosmic and human ideations. Seen as an in terms of objectification, it's an entity. That's one of the real head scratchers, right? It's entified. It's the personified electric vital power, the objectivized thought of the gods, and finally, the word made flesh. And then she gives some secondary aspects: solar energy, electric vital fluid, the preserving fourth principle, the animal soul of nature. And then finally, at its most concrete manifestation, it's electricity. And it acts upon all levels, cosmic, human, and terrestrial. So any thoughts or questions about this? All that is just a breakdown of this paragraph, right? Because, I don't know about you, but I start to glaze over after the 13th listing of a quality, so I had to slap both sides of my face and try to make some sense of it. And this is the result. This chart doesn't include this statement. On the earthly plane, his influence is felt by the magnetic and active force generated by the strong desire of the magnetizer. The Theosophical Glossary and De Peruker further describe how a magnetizer works. So I love this illustration. It says here, what is that? Sarin, or tissue paper scattering the will of the magnetizer to prevent somnambulism. Pretty great. Okay, could we get a reader for this, please?
Harry, can you read that for us, please?
Yeah. Magnetism, like other forces, is a manifestation of the activities of living beings. These forces are at the same time the physical counterparts, reflections, or phases of the universal cosmic electromagnetism, life energy, or FOAT. Magnetism, whether diffuse or localized or in the form of animal magnetism, is an emanation from the beings which produce it from their own inner vital power, and hence magnetism is a fluid. Those who are especially endowed with the faculty of arousing it in themselves and projecting it, mainly through the tips of the fingers or the eyes, can use it for either corrective or for evil and destructive purposes. While all other beings, even inanimate objects, possess it but do not emanate it willfully or consciously. It flows forth from them as an aura, usually unconsciously. Thus, magnetism has an auric efflux or fluid, which finds its foundation in the vitality or pranic sources of the beings or things from which it flows. If the healer or practitioner is a magnetizer, the whole explanation lies in the successful conveying of prana or vitality from his own healthy body to the diseased body or diseased organ or part, which healthy vitality or life force expels or changes the inharmonious vibrations from the afflicted part and restores harmony therein, thus bringing about health.
Thank you, Carrie. So I included the second quote because I didn't want you to think that it's just a parlor trick, that where you need to use a piece of tissue paper in order to keep from being, somnambulized or hypnotized, right? Magnetism is one of the radiation and magnetism are the two fundamental ways that healers work in esoteric parlance. So any thoughts or questions about this? The phrase, the electric vital fluid, let's see, where is this? Yeah, here we go. The phrase, the electric vital fluid, in the last sentence of the paragraph references a long footnote. So could we get a reader, please?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. In 1882, the president of the Theosophical Society, Colonel Olcott, was taken to task for asserting in one of his lectures that electricity is matter. Such, nevertheless, is the teaching of the occult doctrine. Force, energy, may be a better name for it, so long as European science knows so little about its true nature. Yet matter it is, as much as ether is matter, since it is as atomic and those several removes from the latter. It seems ridiculous to argue that because a thing is imponderable to science, therefore it cannot be called matter. Electricity is immaterial in the sense that its molecules are not subject to perception and experiment, yet it may be, and occultism says it is, atomic. Therefore, it is matter, but even supposing it were unscientific to speak of it in such terms, once electricity is called in science a source of energy simply, and a force, where is that force or that energy which can be thought of without thinking of matter? Maxwell, a mathematician and one of the greatest authorities upon electricity and its phenomena, said years ago that electricity was matter, not motion merely. If we accept the hypothesis that the elementary substances are composed of atoms, we cannot avoid concluding that electricity, also positive as well as negative, is divided into definite elementary portions which behave like atoms of electricity. We will go further than that and assert that electricity is not only substance, but that it is an emanation from an entity, which is neither God nor devil, but one of the numberless entities that rule and guide our world according to the eternal law of karma.
Yeah, see the addendum to this book, which we'll get into. So any thoughts or questions about this? Modern practical science still doesn't recognize electricity as matter because, to quote HPB, its molecules are not subject to perception and experiment, at least not by the lower senses. Just for reference, here's a simple modern definition of electricity from Wikipedia. Could we get a reader? Maybe you could read it, BL.
Yeah, I picked the little ones. Electricity is the set of physical phenomena associated with the presence and motion of matter that has a property of electric charge. Electricity is related to magnetism, both being part of, both being part of the phenomenon in electromagnetism as described by Maxwell's equations.
Did you have the little toolbar jump in front of the words?
No, I had someone made a comment and it popped up on my screen.
Yeah, that's Zoom's interface can really interfere with this, but we just have to deal with it. So I don't know about you, but when I read this, the first thought that comes to mind is they don't know what electricity is, right? It's a set of physical phenomena associated with the presence and motion of matter that has the property of an electric charge. It's like a circular definition, right? It's related to magnetism, and it's a part of the phenomenon of electromagnetism, right? But it's, to me, it's not a real definition, right? Anyway, the fact that, or at least theosophical theory, that electricity is atomic, meaning that it manifests on the atomic subplane of the physical plane, explains why, quote, European science knows so little about its true nature. In fact, you could say that Fohat, now here, this particular footnote is talking just about electricity. And, she's making the argument that its substantive or particulate aspect is atomic, which is why it can't be measured, right? But you could say that Fohat, of which electricity is the lowest manifestation, exists on the atomic subplane of every one of these planes and of planes higher than that, right? Okay. So Hermann von Helmholtz did indeed give a Faraday lecture called The Modern Developments of Faraday's Conception of Electricity, during which he made the statements cited here by HPB, though Helmholtz, at least in his lecture, developed the idea of atoms of electricity no further than just the statement you see, even though it was a long lecture. Citing this lecture, the Encyclopedia Britannica states the following. Could we get a reader for this?
Yes. First off, Lenore says, are we not all electric substance?
Yes, especially when you go back to the idea put forth by Einstein, which is that, matter is just energy. And if you give the quality, if you assign the quality of Fohat to that energy, then it's going to be an aspect of electricity, though not necessarily, partaking of or defined by and only by, the current that you get, for instance, from a wall socket, because that whole idea of electricity has many different aspects and forms to it. Okay, a reader, please.
Yeah, Lenore, can you read that for us, please?
In 1881, in a lecture delivered in Faraday's honor in London, Helmholtz argued that if scientists accepted the existence of chemical atoms, as most chemists of the time did, then Faraday's laws necessarily implied the particular nature of electricity.
Yeah, I'm going to have to correct you there. It's the particulate nature, meaning that it has particles.
Ah, okay, thank you. This hypothetical particle was soon Christianed, the electron, and ironically, the physics of its existence helped to falsify Helmholtz's theories of electrodynamics.
Thank you. Okay, so this is, I don't want to get too much into this, but it's just interesting that they, so often in 19th century science, some scientists of that era touched on certain esoteric certitudes, but then didn't further develop them, like the existence of ether, which has been dropped entirely from the lexicon, scientific lexicon, at least for a long time. I don't know about absolutely current science, maybe Bohm has some ideas around that. Anyway, next up, HPB states, we will go further than that and assert that electricity is not only substance, but that it is an emanation from an entity, which is neither good nor devil, but one of the numberless entities that rule and guide our world according to the eternal law of karma. So let's take a look at this excerpt from the online Theosophical Glossary entry on electricity. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yvonne, can you read that for us? You should be able to unmute your, there you go.
Yes. The Secret Doctrine states that electricity is atomic, as signifying infinitesimal particles, which obtains confirmation from modern research and theory. Again, the statement that electricity is intimately involved in the manifestations of all forms of life is being elucidated by investigations relative to the currents which accompany vital actions in living organisms. The standpoint of occultism is that no cosmic force or manifestations of any cosmic force is different from cosmic life itself, except in its subhava or characteristic attributes, and furthermore that no smallest particle or point of infinite space is lifeless, so that the grossest matter is to be looked upon as a dense composite of vital action. From these two postulates, it follows that electricity is not only vitality, but vitality controlled by intelligence, and our own inability to sense the intelligence and electric action lies solely in our ignorance of how cosmic intelligence acts, where it is all permeant and virtually infinite in its manifestations, whereas our own ideas of vital action are limited to the very small compass of our acquaintance with particular units, which we call living.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts about this illuminating entry on electricity? Okay, I'm just...
we do have a hand up.
Okay.
Robert, go ahead. You should be able to unmute yourself. Do you have a question? Robert, can you unmute yourself? I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just got the little screen. Okay, what I wanted to say is I sometimes get confused with the matter versus spirit. It seems like everything is relatively matter or relatively spirit, no matter, depending on where you are, kind of in a almost like a theory of relativity related to these kinds of things.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's a relative position, right? For instance, the monad, our monads exist on the second subplane of the cosmic physical plane. So cosmically, our entire existence, including our truest of true selves, our monadic awareness, which from our perspective couldn't be less material, nonetheless has its being on the cosmic physical plane. So clearly, from the perspective of cosmic consciousness, our even the source of our being, from our perspective anyway, is matter or material, you know. So yeah, absolutely, it's and it ever could say permutates as you move towards spirit, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And then Trudy has her hand up too.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about electricity. Esoteric healing is, and also absent healing is all electricity.
Yeah, certainly, because basically what you're doing is directing force or vitality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so it's, you know, remember that segment on the magnetizer, right? Which is really the ability to direct photic currents for healing purposes, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that we can be receptive to them is because we ourselves are made up of those same currents. And therefore they can be shifted towards a more healthy paradigm.
Yes. Well, we are electric. We are electric beings.
Exactly. Indeed, we are. Yeah. Right. Remember, one of the qualities of Fohat is that he, quote, hardens the atoms. That is to say, it is that energy that is responsible for our articulation, our seemingly separate selves, for the purpose of creating forms that can house successive levels of consciousness, right? But in fact, that same energy is part of the process by which we re-become one with the spirit aspect. But it's Fohat or Eros permeates the entire paradigm, you know, of spirit matter. Okay. Finally, the addenda here cited, the very bottom there, appears in the final section of book 2, which in later publications becomes volume 3. It's a great resource. But it wasn't clear to me just what HPB was suggesting we look up, since neither Fohat nor the law of karma appears as a topic in this section, at least not that I could find. Anyway, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yes. Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Okay, well, the last quotes that we've been talking about makes me think of, you know, one of the basic tenets of ageless wisdom, which is energy follows thought.
Yeah, energy is thought.
Yeah.
And so when you reconfigure the energy through thought, then you draw, you know, that which follows. Yeah.
Okay, so what do you want me to read? I see that, oh, here we go. Whoops. Okay.
In India, sorry.
Yeah. In India, Fohat is connected with Vishnu and Surya in the early character of the first god. For Vishnu is not a high god in the Rig Veda. The name Vishnu is from the root vish, to pervade, and Fohat is called the pervader and the manufacturer because he shapes the atoms from crude material. In the sacred texts of the Rig Veda, Vishnu also is a manifestation of the solar energy, and he is described as striding through the 7 regions of the universe in 3 steps, the Vedic god having little in common with the Vishnu of later times. Therefore, the two are identical in this particular feature, and one is the copy of the other. It is well known that, do you want me to read the footnote?
Wait a minute. No, it's not. Hang on a sec. Why did I think it was a mistake that I made that?
Okay.
Oh yeah, go ahead. It's here. It references Fohat is called the purveyor and the manufacturer because he shapes the atoms from crude material. Go ahead.
It is well known that sand, when placed on a metal plate in vibration, assumes a series of regular curved figures of various descriptions. Can science give a complete explanation of this fact?
Okay, so I think what she's referencing here is that quality of vibrational pervasion, the purveyor and manufacturer of this. Well, I'm sure that science could provide a very exoteric explanation, a very detailed exoteric one, but yeah. Okay. So any questions about this? This description of Vishnu's 4 arms suggests 4 Fohatic activities, as do the fiery symbols. This is in one of the earlier statues of Vishnu. Could we get a reader, please?
I'll read it. The 4 arms are also said to be the symbols of 3 fundamental functions or tendencies: creative tendency, Shristi, the cohesive tendency, Shrithi, and dispersion and liberation, Leia. And 4th being the notion of individual existence, Ahamkara, from which all individualized forms arise.
Okay, so do you recognize these functions or tendencies as being Fohatic, right? It's creative, it's cohesive, and eventually it disperses and liberates, right? So there is a strong connection between that original idea of Vishnu and Fohat. Another indication of the tie between Vishnu and Fohat can be found in the fact that they are both symbolized by the 6-pointed star. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Martha S., can you read that for us, please?
Yes, let me make it bigger on my screen. The geometrical symbol of number 6 is the interlaced triangles, or the 6-pointed star, called by the Hindus the sign of Vishnu, and by the Hebrews the shield of David, often miscalled the seal of Solomon. Among the Egyptians, it was the symbol of generation, the union of fire and water, the male and female. In its unity, primordial light is the 7th or highest principle. Daivi Prakriti, the light of the unmanifested logos. But in its differentiation, it becomes Fohat, or the 7 suns. The former is symbolized by the central point in the double triangle, the latter by the hexagon itself, or the 6 limbs of Microprosopus, the 7th being Malkuth, the bride of the Christian Kabbalists.
Thanks, Martha. So very often, if you find the geometrical symbol, you can often find relationship between concepts through that symbol. Next up, could we get a reader, please?
Regine, can you read that for us, please?
Yep. They make of him the messenger of their will.
Hang on.
Yep.
I always just put the verse up there to show you that we're still talking about that verse, but you want to start reading with the 3 and 7 where the black print is.
Okay, thank you. The 3 and 7 strides refer to the 7 spheres inhabited by man of the esoteric doctrine, as well as to the 7 regions of the earth. Notwithstanding the frequent objections made by would-be Orientalists, the 7 worlds of spheres of our planetary chain are distinctly referred to in the esoteric Hindu scriptures. But how strangely all these numbers are connected with like numbers in other cosmogonies, and with their symbols, can be seen from comparison and parallelism made by students of old religions. The 3 strides of Vishnu through the 7 regions of the universe of the Rig Veda have been variously explained by commentators as meaning fire, lightning, and the sun, cosmically, and as having been taken in the earth, the atmospheres, and the sky, also as the 3 steps of the dwarf, Vishnu incarnation. Through more philosophically and in the astronomical sense, very, sorry, I lost myself. In the astronomical sense, very correctly, they are explained by
Orna Baba.
Arun Baba as being the various positions of the sun, rising, noon, and setting. Esoteric philosophy alone explains it clearly, and the Zohar laid it down very philosophically and comprehensively. It is said and plainly demonstrated therein that in the beginning, the Elim, were called Ishad, one, or the deity is one in many. A very simple idea in a pantheistic conception, in its philosophical sense, of course. Then came the change. Jehovah is Elohim, thus unifying the multiplicity and taking the first step towards monotheism. Now to the query, how is Jehovah Elohim? The answer is by 3 steps from below.
Okay, so this is an introduction to a new concept having to do with the 3 and 7. Any thoughts or questions about this so far? Hopefully,
Yes.
Oh, good.
Go ahead, Scott.
I was noting the 3 positions of the sun, rising, noon, and setting, that aspect of 3 out of 4, which I associate first off with the Masonic Lodge. It has light and 3 sections in the lodge, but the north side of the lodge is always dark. It's the 4th side.
Right. And and you could say that the position not described here is the night, where the sun is not visible. So yeah.
And it goes all into the darkness and source.
Yeah, I think also you could connect these 3 positions, actually 4, with the Hindu gods, that Brahma, who's the creator, would be like the rising sun. And then you have the sustainer at noontime, and the setting sun would be the Shivic aspect of the destroyer, right? And then you have this pralaya period between cycles, before it all starts again.
And the Egyptians had different names for the sun, depending upon which position it was in as well.
There you have it. Yeah.
And the transit of the sun through the night, which is on so many of the temples' walls.
Right. In fact, each segment, it was really broken down, wasn't it?
Yes, they really did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Anything else?
Well, we're getting into the good stuff here, coming to the numbers.
Yeah, well, there are a few among us who think this is the good stuff. So I'm glad to hear that.
It's all great.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? There are many. Yeah, go ahead.
Martha has her hand up.
Go ahead.
Thank you for unmuting me. It occurred to me that is there something in the Secret Doctrine that indicates then Fohat is an energy that transfers that generative power from night to day?
Yes, in fact, you know, when we were talking before about the four aspects of Fohat, you know, that it's initially an abstraction. Nonetheless, it is a part of the makeup of the pre-creative aspect. It's still part of that. It exists in the universal mind as the means by which that mind will impress itself on matter. So it exists in that stage, which would be like the pralayic stage, and then it is creative and is part of that creating process through the fact that it, quote, hardens the atoms. That is, it unifies and connects and binds atomic substance, right, from homogeneity, right? And then it is a sustaining energy as through such agencies as prana and the vitality that comes through it, electrical vitality, right? For instance, the solar fluid that which is also pranic, which comes from the sun, is fohatic, right? And then in the end, it is that which dissociates the cohesion and returns it. So you have the phases of the solar reality and of the Hindu gods represented in that. And I have no idea if I just answered your question or not.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I don't think you can hear me, but you did.
Yeah, somewhere
Yes,
along the line.
we can hear you.
Yeah, you faded out for a bit, but then you were there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? It's a huge paragraph, and it's in some ways introductory. For instance, there are many ways that the 3 and 7 interrelate in theosophy and in terms of manifestation. For example, in this chart, the triangle at the top represents the 3 arupa planes from which emerge, at least in our solar system, the 7 schemes, chains, rounds, globes, root races, and sub-races, all associated with the number 7, right? So you have 3 always representing the pralayic aspect, or the root unmanifest aspect. And then from the third of those 3, which is the third logi, the 7 emerge, right? This passage further describes the hierarchy of 3 and 7. Don't be put off by the complexity of the chart, which illustrates the shift of the life wave from the moon to the earth chain. It's a fascinating transference, which we'll be studying later in the SD when we get to that level. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please? Martha G.
We know you can because you were just with us.
Thank you. Then, when the hosts of being composing the life wave being composed of the entities derived from a former but now dead planet, in our case, the moon, find that the time has arrived for them to enter upon their own particular evolutionary course. They cycle downwards along the planetary chain that has been prepared for them by the 3 hosts of elementary beings. Of the 3 primordial elementary worlds, the forerunners of the life wave, yet integral parts of it. Remember, a hierarchy consists of 10 degrees of states. 3, as the Pythagoreans would have said, remaining in the silence and darkness, to us, of divinity. And 7, entering into manifestation. This life wave passes 7 times in all around the 7 spheres of our planetary chain at, I'm sorry, I can't read the rest. I can't.
At first, cycling down the shadowy arc through all the 7 elements of the cosmos, gathering experience in each one of them. Did your little toolbar jump up and block your view?
Yes, sir, it did.
Yeah, well, we could talk for 20 minutes about how to make that disappear, but we won't.
No, you showed me before and I just did it. I'm very sorry, I didn't think of it.
That's all right. That's no big deal.
But you taught that last time, so we shouldn't do it again.
Yeah, so anyway, it's really important here to associate the life wave, which moves through the form aspect, right, as being very particularly phohatic, right? The will to be, which comes forth from the logos, whether that logos be a solar logos or a cosmic logos, whatever, is directing phohat, AKA the life wave, to move from one manifestation to another, right? So when the form aspect has completed its work and no more can be gained by being in that form, as in the case of the moon in this transference, then it's time for the life wave to be reinitiated and moved to a new form, or in this case, the earth. You know, it's important to remember that this is all phohatic in the carrying out and the infusing of this life wave, right? Okay. Any thoughts or questions about this? We won't get into the chart. Boy, it's you have to drag me screaming from this chart, but we won't do that. Okay. There's a second important exposition of the 3 and 7. This is altogether, it's related obviously, but it's another way of looking at the 3 and 7. As we'll discover in the next paragraph, the 3 can also refer to spirit, soul, and body, which have their higher correspondence in the triple logos. Could we get a reader for this most obtuse of probably all the quotes today?
Scott, you're our go-to for obtrusive.
There we go.
For obtuseness, okay.
Or abstruseness. Obtuseness, has a different kind of
Yeah,
flavor.
my fault.
All right, whatever. Starting on this one, all right. These 3 coils, in some mysterious way, are charged with the 3 types of energy, characteristic of the triple logos. In the 3 worlds flow currents of different electricities, is the quote. Then the 7 embodiments of the triple logos, the 7 planetary logi, twist 7 parallel coils to complete the physical atom. Each of these minor 7 coils, when affected by light and sound, throws out 1 color of the solar spectrum and 1 of the 7 rounds, or the natural scale.
7 sounds.
Sounds, thank you. 1 of the 7 sounds, or the natural scale, and therewith the special influence of its planetary logos.
Okay. Yeah, and who was it that wrote this book again, Scott?
That guy, Tinardar.
Kurup Mulagi Hineradasha, something like that. So this guy, this is quite a book. It's all sounds like this. But the point and the reason that I included it is because, we tend to have this idea that the 3, which is pralaic and separate, are completely removed from the 7. But what is here being described is that these 3 qualities or coils carry forth the characteristics, or what calls here the energy characteristics of the triple logos into the 7 stages of manifestation, or the 7 levels, or however you want to describe it, right? So there's an infusement of that, you know. We'll go no further than that, unless you want to. Are there any questions?
Sorry, Martha added from the previous chart that the chart is actually helpful and that it's very important teaching point here.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's a, you could see how useful it is, generally speaking, and how you could be drawn into a deep study of just how specific races transferred and what they when they transferred, on what globes they transferred, etc. So it's, yeah. Okay, so we have this chart, which is very, very similar to Babbitt's atom. Some of you may know that. I should have included it here. It's famous. So remember that an atom of substance is also a planet, right? It's at every level you have some inherence to this threefold energy stream manifesting as 7, right? So this quote relates to 2 systems of, you know, the 2, 3, and 7 systems, and illustrates how involved this subject of the 3 and 7 can be. Okay, back to the text. The 7 regions of the earth are obviously the 7 continents, maybe the easiest sentence in this whole thing to understand. The 3 steps of the dwarf refers to the 5th, which is the first human avatar of Vishnu. But we just ran out of time, so we'll pick up right here next time, end with a colorful description of the avatars of Vishnu. Okay, so could we get dates for next time?
Yes, the next Secret Teachings of All Ages is going to be the 7th of February at 8 p.m. GMT, and the next Secret Doctrine is going to be the 21st of February at 8 p.m.
So, okay, I think then there are, let's see, this is the 17th, 24th. So we got 3 weeks before the next, the one on the 7th, and then 2 weeks after that for the Secret Doctrine. Okay, good. Just look for your invitations, and we'll meet back here. So real privilege to host this webinar series, and I very much appreciate your participation. I know there are concepts here that are not easy, but you know, together we can you know, gain some understanding at least. So thank you all.
Yes, you help us wrap our mind around them, especially with your images and stuff.
Good.
So thank you.
That's good. Okay, all. Until next time, thanks very much for attending.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.